So this is 10 minutes to 2 GMT on Sunday, the 23rd of October 2022. This is the Khoodeelaar television channel, Baby Angel Geronimo editions, broadcasting on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, not on cable platforms. This is the part 1 of the Khoodeelaar television channel, dated the 23rd of October 2022. Now, the continuation from yesterday's edition includes, of course, the marking of the Khoodeelaar launch rally, the campaign launch rally held on Friday, the 22nd of October 2004 in the Greater Haque Street against the corrupt local Tower Hamlets Council's collusion and the corrupt complicit role in inviting the Crossrail Hole attack on the Brick Lane, London E1 area. And we targeted that particular site, which is opposite the building used by the Tower Hamlets Council at the time for various receptions, etc., because that address was used by the then leader of the Tower Hamlets Council, Abbas Uddin Elias Halal, who was a local councillor at the expense of the Brick Lane community area, Brick Lane ward. And Abbas Uddin Elias Halal had refused a reasonable offer given to him by the community, represented by myself, the Khoodeelaar campaign organizer. Contextually, I asked him, Abbas Uddin Elias Halal, to cooperate with the community in opposing, 100%, totally opposing the UK government plot to dig a hole in the Brick Lane area, Crossrail Hole. And I said that Abbasuddin Elias Halal should do that. And as the incumbent in the post of leader of the Labour controlled council group, he should do that by representing the whole council as well. And the meeting took place right behind the site of the demonstration at a restaurant that we use, the Khoodeelaar campaign used for 7-8 years. And Abbasuddin Elias Halal said to me in Siloti, Bhai Sahab, ekta partyr policy. Bhai Sahab, ekta partyr policy. Now it is the same Abbasuddin Elias Halal, 6 years later, was exposed in the private lie Rotten Boris column as the Halal Abbas, Halal dead meat. This is October, and that was the issue of the private lie was about 16th of October, I think, 2010. And the Rotten Boris column piece was headed Halal dead meat, and he was a dead meat politically. I had given him the opportunity 6 years earlier to cooperate with the Khoodeelaar campaign, which represented more than 100% political opinion and preference of the whole community, except the local councillors, like him. So the demonstration we organized and held successfully was aimed at him, even though he personally was not present in the building opposite the spot where we had the rally in the Greater Haque Street in London E1. The Greater Haque Street is not far from the Altavali Park, and it's not far from the Aldgate East tube station. not far from Whitechapel Station either. So we held the demonstration. The first formal initial words were spoken by K. Jordan. And I think that was a big achievement because K. Jordan was a shy person when it came to public speaking. And then I took over. I had to take over in order to get the rally going, spelling out the reasons, rationale, the actual history and the contextual evidence of the collusion with the government by the local corrupt arms council. So as we said before, that rally was the beginning of 8 years of solid, non-stop work by the Khoodeelaar campaign, led by me, activated by me, coordinated by me, monitored by me. And we dealt with all the opposition, especially in the formal sense, in the formal settings of the House of Commons and the House of Lords. We dealt with the so-called QCs at the time. They were the Queen's Counsel, the licensed law trading barristers hired by the government law service, legal service, what is called the GLS. And every single one of the QCs that appeared on behalf of the government, we completely demolished them on the evidence. Now, remember that demonstration was on the 22nd of October 2004. That was one calendar year before the election, the parliamentary election that took place, including the constituency that had this area, Brick Lane, which is Bethnal Green and Bow. And at the election held in May 2005, the then incumbent Labour Member of Parliament, Una King, was ousted by the community, rejected by the community, kicked out by the community. And the vacuum that was created as a result of that was given as a kind benefit to the desperate George Galloway. Because George Galloway had been kicked out by the Labour Party as led by Tony Blair. And George Galloway had no English parliamentary constituency before. He always had a constituency somewhere in Scotland. So when George Galloway was kicked out by Tony Blair, who used an excuse and a pretext against Galloway at that time. Now, this is 2022, and a lot of things have changed from 2005 to 2022 because George Galloway is a degenerate politically. At this date, he is a complete degenerate politically. He would not get the support of the community even if it is not possible physically, but even if he were to personally approach every single eligible voter. Galloway has discredited himself before the constituency like Tower Hamlets, Bethnal Green and Bow, or Poplar and Shadwell, Limehouse and Poplar and Limehouse, that is. Both constituencies have significant numbers of voters who are Muslims. And generally speaking, both constituencies, voters have natural sympathies with the people of Palestine. So George Galloway, in the run-up to his standing as candidate for the Bethnal Green and Bow constituency, did everything he could to come across as a supporter of the Palestinian people, as a supporter of the Muslim community. Now, I have to make a kind of clarify our footnote statement here. In just kind of the middle of the time that he was a member of parliament for Bradford West, George Galloway was approached by Jemima Khan. Jemima is, of course, Jemima Goldsmith, the daughter of James Goldsmith. This Jemima Khan got the name Khan because of her marriage for 6-7 years with Imran Khan, who is now running the campaign in Pakistan against the crooks, dakus, churs, and badmash and criminals. But Jemima Khan, of course, being in England, it's a corrupt kind of thing in England. They call it society. She's a society person, not because of her character, most certainly not because of her integrity, but because of the wealth her father had. And so, therefore, she is a society person. And Jemima Khan uses the society status quite craftily, as she did in the case of the occasion when she went to speak to George Galloway, who was still member of parliament, at the expense of Bradford West, Muslim constituency or Muslim majority constituency. And according to Jemima Khan, George Galloway on that occasion confessed to her that he had become a Muslim. Now, Galloway has not ever confirmed publicly that he is a Muslim. So that remains a case. I mean, unless he has done that in the last few years and I have missed it. If I have missed it, I'll update it duly after checking the facts accordingly. But as I speak now, at this time, 02:03 hours GMT, on Sunday, the 23rd of October 2022, George Galloway is not on the record as having confirmed whether he was a Muslim or not. Now, Jemima Khan behaved in a kind of way that society individuals do. I mean, that was their interest. What was the point of talking about whether Galloway had become a Muslim or not? Unless to appease the anti-Muslim lobby in the media in this country. And Jemima Khan actually, in context and examining all the facts, could have been a plant in order to extract from George Galloway a confession about his relationship with the faith Islam that others had failed. Now, George Galloway is a notorious womanizer. On the record, for example, crass, racist, corrupt Isabel Oakeshott, and he appeared on Sky News press preview one time, more than 10 years ago, and George Galloway literally was melting as he kind of oozed words and phrases to like come across as falling at the feet of Isabella Oakeshott. Then the other one, the one that he did the same thing to, was the Labour Party MP who was involved as a minister at the last kind of years of or period of Gordon Brown's premiership. This woman also was a society girl, come from a kind of rich family. And she was minister in the business department, I think. And she got involved because of the first solution scandal. The first solution scandal, like all the scandals involving the Muslims in Tower Hamlets, has got its connections with the complex of buildings called the East London Mosque and the London Muslim Centre. The first solution criminals, Bangladeshis, were operating their corrupt business with the headquarters based at that complex. And when the facts became known about the first solution stealing the money of some of the most hardworking overseas Bangladeshi migrants, there was understandable, justifiable, instant instant reaction in the Bangladeshi community. Of course, the Bangladeshi community expressed itself by appearing in Brick Lane on the 1st of July of the year 2006. And George Galloway wrongly, completely wrongly and stupidly relied on Ajmal Hussain and other idiots. Ajmal Hussain and other idiots wanted to have a piece of the cake and appear on the television, ethnicity linked television like the channel slaves, showing that they are doing their kind of bit to help the affected Bangladeshis. And George Galloway, on the way from Brick Lane to the Calabro office of this Respect Party at the time, briefly asked me what he should say, which I took in good faith. And I said, tell them, tell people, tell the public in your speech that some of the worst offenders, because the most impoverished workers have been robbed by these criminals. And I expected Galloway to follow that theme. He didn't do that. He used the words in his phrase, paraphrase, but he then deviated. And he was distracted by Ajmal Hussain, who is one of the shallowest of individuals ever to be kind of shown as having anything to do with the community. Ajmal Hussain is a dishonest individual who fucked up this focus of the campaign against the first solution fraudsters. So when there was the rally in Altavali Park against the first solution crooks, Ajmal Hussain wanted to monopolize the appearance at that rally of George Galloway. Galloway did fuck all. Galloway remains to this day, of course, I mean, it's irrelevant in context, but Galloway is deeply, highly ignorant about the community in Tower Hamlets, despite the fact that he has made various claims, including stealing, openly, brazenly, shamelessly stealing the phrase East End lies that I created. I am the one who does this, edits the names of criminals and substitutes the edited name. When he appeared before the members of parliament select committee on Crossrail, George Galloway said he calls it East End lies. He never calls it. He has not conceived of a similar name about any other entity. So Galloway lied there. I'm challenging Galloway to say that what I am calling him a liar about is not true. Let him deny it. Now, Galloway claimed in April 2006 that he had been in politics for 30 years on that date, 2006. And in 30 years in politics, Galloway had not come across a local council as corrupt as Tower Hamlets Council. Fair enough. I recorded that and I photographed him and filmed him. And Galloway offensively, idiotically smoked a cigar in front of all these people indoors. And this was a premises controlled by Ajmal Hussain at the time. Ajmal Hussain was nowhere visible, And none of the others, kind of accompanying Galloway, saw anything wrong in him smoking indoors in front of other people, including myself. So Galloway said that he had never come across a local council like Tower Hamlets Council, which was as corrupt as Tower Hamlets Council. So logically, if Galloway had the opportunity next, what would he do? He would oppose the council and oppose the corruption, wouldn't he? He did no such thing. Galloway became, according to the November 2014 statement he made at the Water Lily Centre in the Mile End Road in London E1. Apparently, in response to Eric Pickles making a statement in the House of Commons on the 4th of November 2014 against Luther Roman's corrupt regime in Tower Hamlets Council. Galloway became shamelessly, Galloway was no longer in Tower Hamlets, but he came here from somewhere else, wherever he was, and he became an addendum, an extension, a tool for the crooks. The crooks were around Luther Roman, and Luther Roman himself was a corrupt, absolutely corrupt, irresponsible, ingrate, ungrateful, ingrate boy. He always kept bringing Ken Lying Still Livingston and George Git Galloway. Now, Galloway doesn't know Tower Hamlets. He never will know Tower Hamlets. And nor does Ken Lying Still Livingston. So those two morons were the keynote or high-profile spiel givers, apparently delivering moral spiels on behalf of the immoral mayor regime of the corrupt individual Luther Roman. Corrupt individual is on the record as corrupt individual. Let me check and let me put that on the record. It is not my saying. It's on the record. So this is the Sky News item, 6th of May 2022. Luther Roman, ex-mayor banned for corrupt and illegal practices, re-elected in London's Tower Hamlets. A former East London mayor who was forced to step down and banned from standing for 5 years has re-emerged to take the top job again. Luther Roman was removed as mayor of Tower Hamlets in 2015 after an election court found him guilty of corrupt and illegal practices. Now, the last few words are quite telling. Although he faced no criminal proceedings. Now, remember that. He faced no criminal proceedings is a formulation that is not the same as saying he was not a criminal. Because he faced no criminal proceedings has got all kinds of explanations. And we shall go to the explanations update in due course later. But as the results of local elections came in on Friday, Mr. Rahman won back the role. His 40,804 votes beat the 33,487 won by his nearest challenger, Labour's John Biggs, who had been in the post since 2015. Mr. Rahman, standing for the Aspire party, claimed he had a bigger mandate than I had in 2014 or in 2010 and pledged to rebuild the borough. He cannot understand the word of rebuild, the meaning of rebuild. He is a liar. He is not rebuilding the borough. He is trying to rebuild a kind of frame, a kind of image for himself. That is very different from rebuilding the borough. He has no idea about rebuilding the borough. He has no idea about the Tower Hamlets community, and he will never do. He said, according to the Sky item, I want to rebuild Tower Hamlets. I want to invest in our future and give our people a better future than we had in the last 7 years. Now let's remind Luther Roman and remind anyone who is watching this. These words, whoever wrote them, they cannot have been written by Luther Roman. I am saying that. And I'm saying that on the basis that if you gave a piece of paper and a pen and asked Luther Roman to write a similar script, he will not be able to do that. That is what I'm saying. Judge me and my administration on our record. There is no record to judge him positively by. What we have delivered in the first term, the only borough in the country to have free home care, we delivered the London living wage. This is all lies, Luther Roman is saying. And the Sky News should not have published these without qualifications, without saying that he is lying. Our promises going forward are even more progressive. Judge me on what we will do for you. One of the issues that had angered voters was Mr. Biggs's implementation of low traffic neighborhoods where residential streets are shut off to limit traffic. Mr. Rahman had suggested one of his first acts as mayor would be to scrap them, saying our roads have been closed, blocked up. It is continuing. It is continuing to more C. It is contributing to more CO2 in the borough when the idea was to reduce it. Back in 2015, Election Commissioner Richard Morey made a series of findings against Mr. Rahman. Remember what the Sky News is saying against Mr. Rahman, saying the findings revealed an alarming state of affairs in the East London borough. 4 voters have taken legal action against Mr. Rahman, making a series of allegations, including personation in postal voting and at polling stations, which involves people illegally voting on others' behalf. Mr. Rahman had insisted there was little, if any, evidence of wrongdoing against him, with his lawyers dismissing the claims as, in some cases, downright deliberate false allegations. Because of Mr. Morey's ruling, the 2014 Tower Hamlets mayoral election was ruled to be void, and the rerun was won by Mr. Biggs. So that was the Sky News. So it's not like a unnamed individual. The allegations were against Lutfur Rahman. The four electors who filed a petition that went to Richard Morey, the election commissioner, made allegations against Lutfur Rahman personally. And Richard Morey's ruling, which was published dated the 23rd of April 2015, makes series of serious allegation of dishonesty against Lutfur Rahman. They're all accessible online and otherwise. So we held the demonstration on the 22nd of October 2004 in the Greater X Street against Towners Council leader Abbas Uddin Elias Halal. Now, of course, as a result of the impact of our demonstration, Abbas Uddin Elias Halal lost that little post as leader of the Towners Council, and he was replaced by Michael Crook. Now, Michael Crook is a racist liar who has been he appeared in Tower Hamlets probably because he thought that this was a kind of soft touch in all terms, and he actually managed to get the positions of advising some mental slave boys in the Bangladeshi community. These mental slave boys are professional, born mental slaves. Either they are mentally enslaved to the likes of Michael Crook, or before he appeared, they are mentally enslaved to the likes of Dan Jones. Dan Jones is married to, quote, officially, Dan Jones is married to or has been married to a counselor called Denise Jones. But it is Denise Jones that Michael Crook began an affair with, and he completely took over Denise Jones's personal life and ousted Dan Jones from the marriage, if you like. So this is the reality. So Michael Crook became the leader of the Tower Hamlets Council after the ouster of the very seriously exposed Abysmal. We call him Abysmal because he is abysmally poor, dysfunctional politically, socially, electorally. So when Abysmal lost the position and it was taken over or grabbed hold of by Michael Crook, what happened? We had to deal with Michael Crook, not Abysmal. Abysmal could not begin to deal with Michael Crook or anybody like that. Because Abysmal morally completely surrendered and kind of compromised by serial racists. Serial racists. I mean, these are supposed to be Bangladeshis with kind of political clout. None of them has got any idea about political clout. So go back to Lutfur Rahman, another Bangladeshi born kind of politician. I mean, wiki entry, which was begun as a fabricated entry to promote Lutfur Rahman before he became a candidate for the mayor post. The wiki entry has got Lutfur Rahman as a British politician. Shit! What is politician about Lutfur Rahman? These are parasites. These are parasites abusing the community and benefiting from the Khoodeelaar campaign and all the other campaigns that have been running for nearly 50 years in identifying the community, creating an image for the community, and robustly, rigorously exposing the series of racists, one after the other. Lutfur Rahman would never have got anywhere near any profile without the Khoodeelaar campaign. but he discredited himself, and his so-called floaters, supporters discredited themselves. One of the most discreditable things that Luther Rahman is guilty of is his failure to recognize the betrayal of these three girls. These three Bethnal Green girls, most of whom are known collectively after by Shamima Begum. These girls are teenage girls that were brainwashed, groomed, and then they were trafficked to Syria. And then Shamima Begum ended up losing her British by birth citizenship, taken away from her by the idiots Sajid, stupid Jabid. Years after that happened, and years after the criminal racists at the Supreme Court in England kind of upheld Sajid Jabid's stupidity, a journalist has disclosed the fact or the facts of how Shamima and her friends were groomed and trafficked. So how is it that Lutfur Rahman gave the statement and Sky News idiotically kind of quoted from him on the 6th of May 2022? And Sky News had no idea. Sky News had no idea when they were reporting about local council. They should have that idea that every local council is legally under obligation to what is called as the safeguarding the children duty. That is the safeguarding the children duty, and there can be no higher reason or ground or cause for rushing to safeguard potential girls in the potentially vulnerable girls in that situation that Shamima and her two friends were in. It has been, one was this published this, and we shall actually put it contextually. Remember, we are marking the demonstration against Star Harmless Council's corruption and criminal role, and the demonstration that we held. We staged, held, and carried out most effectively on Friday, the 22nd of October 2004 in the Greater X Street. Against Crossrail, but against the overall dysfunctionality and corruption and criminality of Star Harmless Council. Now, these are the items that have appeared. Let's say, when did they appear first? these items. This is the one dated the it says 2 months ago. So its headline is Shamima Begum, Canadian spy trafficked schoolgirl into Syria. That is one. It says it's on the Islamic channel dot television. That is the and the other one is the Guardian, which says this is dated the this is the 2nd of September 2022, and it says Shamima Begum story. Shamima Begum's is a story of trafficking, betrayal, and now it seems a state cover up. Now, funnily enough, this byline in the Guardian of all places sounds like an Iranian name, if I'm not mistaken. Azadi Moaveni. Why do they have this name? Why don't they have a white name? Because they are embarrassed, aren't they, to admit the role played by the state spy, Canadian state spy. Now this one is again on the Guardian, 31st of August 2022, a few days before the other one. So this one is Emily Duggan and Dan Sabag. Now Dan Sabag is a name that we shall come back to remembering. Shamima Begum smuggled into Syria for Islamic State by Canadian spy, for heaven's sake. Now, these are kind of uncountable numbers of such stories now. So when the Sky News published the stupid piece promoting Lutfur Rahman as promising this, that, and the other, and all these improvement and all this rubbish, dated the 6th of May 2022, did the Sky News idiots have the sense to check the facts? We have been saying right from the beginning, by beginning we refer to the actual date when Shamima Begum and the other two girls were publicly reported as having been filmed as they were traveling through Turkey. So that was sometime in 2015, February 2015. So right from that start of the public sighting of the girls being in transit. So that's 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 20. 7 years. We have been saying it for 7 years. The Tower Hamlets Council had failed. Remember, if it had not failed and if it had discharged its safeguarding children duties, then it would have got in touch with all the particular sources and elements, and it would have investigated the school itself and investigated the state of the connections that these girls were making with whoever. It did nothing. Not only did it not do that, now this is the Sunday, the 23rd of October 2022, and there is no sign, not a sign of Lutfur Rahman or Tower Hamlets Council or any councillor in Tower Hamlets, either Labour Party councillor, so-called opposition, or even Peter Goulds. Peter Goulds, the racist friend, who misses no opportunity to condemn Muslims, and who is the only person on the face of the English mainland who thinks that the most racist, most anti-Muslim, Katie, this blogger, is his best friend. I caught him. I caught him showing Katie around Deal Street near the Brooklyn area. As I have said, in 2015, July 2015. As soon as Peter Gould saw me in the Deal Street looking at them, he literally, he nearly fell off. He nearly fell down as he ran. As he ran towards a waiting car, followed by or preceded by Katie the Hopkins. They hopped to the car and the car sped away from the scene of the crime. They were kind of consorting with one another at 200 miles per hour or something speed. Why was Peter Gould so desperate to leave Deal Street in order to escape me? What was he afraid of? I could only see and report, which I have been doing since. And Katie Hopkins, what on earth was he doing, bringing Katie Hopkins, of all places, to Brooklyn, one of the most easily and often identifiable areas inhabited by a Muslim demography? Why was he doing that? If it wasn't to create further materials for Katie Hopkins to use, abuse, to incite hatred against the Muslims. So, Peter Gould has been silent about Shamima Begum being the victim of the trafficking by the Canadian spy, as has Lutfur Rahman, as has this weird kind of post holder called Ohid Ahmed, community safety. He held the post for too long as community safety in Tower Hamlets. While he was holding that post as community safety on behalf of Lutfur Rahman's corrupt regime, Ohid Ahmed indulged, corruptly indulged, anti-socially indulged, irresponsibly indulged, anti-democratically indulged, offensively indulged in abusing the council money to order the council's employees, cleaners, to overdo the cleaning around his home in the Auburn Street in London, E14. How dare he? How dare he is answered by the fact that there is silence, even from Peter Gould. The only person who didn't kind of observe that in silence was a former councillor, Labour Party councillor. There was only one, Josh Peck. Josh Peck kind of shared the information with Ted Jury, and Ted Jury published on his blog what Ohid Ahmed was up to at the time. But even Ted Jury hasn't published anything about the silence by Tower Hamlets Council over the fact published by all these multiple kind of agencies now, news outlets, that a Canadian spy trafficked these girls to Syria. So it's Peter Gould is silent, Ted Jury is silent, the Labour Party is silent, and they all have the audacity to say that these girls were bent on destroying Britain. These girls were not bent on doing anything of the sort. These three children were victims, as we have said for the last 7 years. And these children were victimized by a combination of dysfunctional state agencies in the UK. Well, the Tower Hamlets Council is the local state. And what happened in this disclosure that they're reporting about now, and they've been reporting since late August and early September, is that the Canadian spies' criminal role was then later covered up by MI5 and MI6, for Haque's sake. MI5 and MI6, the British intelligence so called operations. So, when we said in the speech or speeches, as I said, because we made several speeches in the Greater X Street at the rally on the 22nd of October 2004. The Tower Hamlets Council was corrupt. Tower Hamlets Council was led by corrupt individuals, and Tower Hamlets Council was unfit for purpose. We meant every word of it. Now, that was in 2004. Now, these children, Shamima Begum, etc., they were infants in 2004. They went to become school children much later. But for most of that time when they were school children, from the inception, from the various descriptions that these reporter journalists has published, and other circumstantial evidence that we have gathered contemporaneously over the last 7 years as we have been condemning Tower Hamlets Council, many of the grooming took place right from the day that Luthvron became elected mayor. Okay. So when I told him, Luthvroman, as I filmed him, it's a brief film, but I historically filmed him. Now, how prophetic was that filming? I filmed Luthvroman from the ground in Brick Lane as he was coming down to the ground from the inside of the Brick Lane Mosque on Friday, the 29th of October, 2010. That was just over a week after the so-called election. And I told him, when he grinned, falsely grinned at me and falsely staged a salute at me. These are all in the film. I'm not making any of it up. Of course, I'd never do, but this is very important. It is so significant a film. He thought it was a joke. He thought it was a lark. He thought he would give me a salute, bogus salute, and give me a bogus salam, and he would give me a bogus set of words, the liar boy. I said to him that he had the absolute duty urgently to sit down with me so that he could deal with the corrupt Tower Hamlets Council doing even more corrupt things and criminal things against the community. And the conversation took place in Siloti, as the film shows. If it had an English bit, it will be there on the film. And this liar, Lutfur Rahman, said to me that he will sit down with me after he settled down in the post of the mayor. Remember, he was only in that post about 7-8 days since the so-called election. And there was one witness. There were others, but the one witness who actually spoke is involved with a thing called Desh, the ethnicity-linked newspaper, which is itself a dishonest outlet. But this individual is called Taisur Mahmud. And he was standing not far from where I was standing as I spoke to Lutfur Rahman. And he agreed with me, and he said to Lutfur Rahman that Lutfur Rahman should sit down with me. Now, from the day that this boy was introduced to me in 1980, when he was a schoolboy, by 2 or 3 boys of the Progressive Youth Organization who had been my students for 7 years, unique world exclusive studentship they had they were fortunate to be. These boys introduced him to me at the entrance to the business development center, not far from the site where we held the demonstration on the 22nd of October 2004. But that was sometime in 1980. There were more than 24 years before the demonstration. So in the 24 years, this boy, Luthroman, kind of got trained to tell lies and trained to grin dishonestly. So when he grinned at me, nearly 20, 24 years plus another 6, so 30 years later, nearly, he grinned at me from 1980 to 2010, is 30 years. He grinned at me and saluted me. He thought that I had lost some of my faculties. How dare he? I knew right along. Long before he was biologically conceived, I had been studying dishonest individuals and children and whatever. I knew that he was a liar right from the word go. Too much, too ready grin. So when he said that he would sit down with me, I understood that he would not sit down with me. And I stood there filming as they faded into the other side of Brick Lane. What did they do? Now, anyone who is familiar with Brick Lane and the Brick Lane Mosque entrance, if you look towards the Shoreditch area or the northern direction, you can see the Taj store, not far, but on the other side of the road. I think Lutfur Rahman with his crew, my goodness, the crew, went in the direction of Taj store. I did not film them inside or near the Taj store precisely because I wanted to maintain my strategic filming position. So I stood where I was generally. And then I panned the camera behind them as they walked southwards to the, let's say, Osborne Street and went past the Brick Lane Mosque or past the opposite of Brick Lane Mosque, let's say. And then Lutfur entered one shop, one restaurant, another shop, another shop, and he was grinning all the time, and he was grinning as he was apparently shaking hands with the people. This is all on the film. The film was not more than few minutes, but those few minutes are worth entirety of Lutfur Rahman's life. It sums up the corruption, the dishonesty, and the craftiness and the creepy behavior on this part of this boy. Until they went into the corner of Brick Lane and the side road they had to go to because the business HQ of a thing called Clifton, owned by Shiraj Hook, Huq. Now, Shiraj has altered his name many ways to such an extent that it almost appears if he does the short abbreviation like my name. That is a matter of fact. Now, Shiraj was one of the, if not the, main peddlers of the claim that elected mayor was the best thing that Bara had ever had. So this was the 10 days after, or within 10 days of Luther getting that post. So what do? He went to Brick Lane Mosque to perform this stunned, stunned, stage stunt of being in the Brick Lane Mosque rather than in the Whitechapel Mosque, the East London Mosque, that actually is the site where his controllers and his operators, his handlers actually are based at. But Luther wants to create an impression, falsely create the impression that he actually identifies with the wider body of the Bangladeshi population, which is related to the Brick Lane Mosque traditionally. Not the people who control the Brick Lane Mosque, but the people who usually go to the Brick Lane Mosque from the various parts of the community. So when he came to that corner, Lutfer and his gang or his crew were desperate to go and celebrate or have a celebratory handshake with Shiraj in the Clifton office. Didn't they? I keep frustrating criminal activities, do I not? And I keep frustrating them while I'm witnessing them. So they're walking briskly into the street, into that side road, and suddenly they come right in front of the door to the Clifton and they freeze. Now, Luthuraman is not directly staring in my direction, and I'm standing now on the Osborne Street side of the junction with my film, my camera, as they call, running. The camera is running. And I am putting on the face of a very seasoned, experienced witness to the criminality by thousands of criminals in my community, everywhere. I am saying, what the fuck are the morons thinking I'm doing? I'm not going to let them go in there. I am not going to let them go in there and celebrate with Shiraj the election, the corrupt election. I'm not. So I stood there and I unfroze them, and they unfroze and they walked past Shiraj's Clifton and they walked towards the Greater X Street. That was on the 29th of October 2010. They go back to 22nd of October 2004, and we are in the Greater X Street, and there is no sign of Lutfur Rahman. Because Lutfur Rahman in 2004 is only a newly elected councillor, and he owed his election to Abbas alias Halal. He owes it to others in Abbas's own little cabal, but mostly to Abbas. And so therefore Abbas was not there at the building and nor was Lutfur Rahman. But we delivered a full hour of speech against our Armed Council crooks and corruption. And we did that most effectively because, as I said, as a direct result of that demonstration, that rally, Abbas alias Halal and his regime as the leader of the Labour Party group on Armed Council came under immediate attacks from sources that included, of course, Michael Crook. And Michael Crook eventually took over as the leader of the Armed Council. Now that was in 2004-5. Now, 2004 was still historically another world which didn't know or didn't have anyone called George Galloway. George Galloway only materialized after he got in at the May 2005 parliamentary election. And as he faced Jeremy Paxman on Newsnight, live from Bethnal Green Town Hall. What is Bethnal Green Town Hall? It's not the Bethnal Green Town Hall, it's the York Hall, I think, where the counting took place. George Galloway could not be more pompous, more bombastic, and more shameless. When the idiot Jeremy Paxman asked him the question about how did Galloway feel about ousting a black woman like Una King, instead of explaining that or engaging in that, the shameless, grotesquely shameless, ungrateful George Galloway demanded that Jeremy Paxman should congratulate him. No. What Galloway should have said is that he was there, standing there, as the elected member of parliament only because of the people of Bethnal Green and Bow. But Galloway doesn't know any such thing. Galloway, right from the beginning of his teenage years in Dundee, is a very personally very insecure individual. He needs a platform, other people's platform, not his. He cannot have his platform. That's the whole point. Because he represents nothing of substance himself. So he has to parasite himself at the expense of other people. And he has parasited himself at the expense of the people of Bethnal Green and Bow for 5 years. And then he did for almost the same number of years at the expense of the people of Bradford West. Both lots are mainly Muslim. And the ingrate, the ungrateful George Galloway has no shame. We go back to this first book. John Stonehouse wrote several books. And his first book, The Death of an Idealist, is a book that refers to, or the original edition, unless they've changed the edition. The original edition of The Death of an Idealist has a lot of descriptions of Bengalis. Remember, it's not Bangladeshis, because I'm a Bangladeshi. I'm not a Bengali. I'm a Siloti and a Bangladeshi. And in my definition, Bangladesh is, at several levels, a federation. It's a linguistic federation, it's a religious federation, and most certainly it's an ethnic federation. And the people of Rohingya, the people of southeast Bangladesh, are made of various ethnicities, linguistic groups, and faiths. All right. Now, Galloway has no idea about the Bangladeshi community here or anywhere. But he always managed, before he got caught, and I'll come to explaining what I mean by him being caught, to stand on the top of a truck, the only white man on the top of the truck, being feted and cheered by mainly Muslim young people. The spectacle is grotesque, racist. He is the one who made the exaggerated claims against the Israelis. Now, Israelis are doing serious damage to human rights of the Palestinians. But as a Muslim, I'm not going to just condemn Israel. I'm going to condemn everyone who is violating. This is not a favor I'm doing to Israel. I'm doing this as a duty as a Muslim. I have to tell the truth. I have to be impartial. But Galloway overdid the focusing on Israel. Now, why did Galloway do that? Because Galloway corruptly thought that he would then mislead most of the potential Muslim donors that would give him money. When I went to the Club Row office of the so-called Respect Party, I saw George Galloway being handed what looked to me like hundreds of envelopes by one of the persons there. And amazingly, I'd never forget that scene. Galloway kept opening each of the envelopes, and he knew he was practiced. And craftily locating the check inside each envelope and taking the check and chucking the rest of the envelope away. I mean, shortly after that evidence that I witnessed, I told one of my friends at the time, I said, this is what I saw Galloway do. Expertly locating the check inside each envelope and chucking the rest of the envelope away with contempt. This was not a revolutionary. This was not a socialist. This was not a campaigner. This was a very, very pathetic parasite at work. George Galloway sued the Daily Telegraph group, but he has never sued the BBC because far from whatever the Daily Telegraph said and paid him defamation damages over, was nothing as compared to the contents of the Newsnight program about Galloway getting money, seeking money from Benazir Bhutto and other Pakistani sources. But yet, Galloway never sued the BBC. That explains it, doesn't it? All of that is made even worse when you look at Brexit. When Brexit came along, George Galloway shamelessly converted himself as a racist because he was with Nigel Nasty Farage and other Brexiteering racists. When the Brexit referendum was kind of declared and the Muslims were targeted right across Britain and dozens of reports started to pour into the various newsrooms, Galloway was completely silent, absolutely silent. And there are other kind of updates that I can add to how Galloway has degenerated. This is absolute degeneration. So when he stood at the Water Lily Center in November 2014, as he had been hired by the handlers of Lutfur Rahman to stage a spiel aimed at Eric Pickles. Galloway made a fantastic, racist, stupid, unfounded speech. He said, and it is on the record, Galloway claimed that it was him who paved the way, opened the way for any, and his word, not mine, because his word is Bengali, not Bangladeshi. that any Bengali to become an MP from this area. How dare he? Without the votes of the constituency Bangladeshis and Muslims, he would never have been able to appear on the Newsnight program against Jeremy Poexman. It was us who had decided long time ago, long time before he appeared as a candidate, that we would not have Una King stay as MP for the Bethnal Green and Bow area. That is what we decided. But he had no idea. Galloway had no idea as to the constituency. He thought that those boys that took him on their shoulders and danced in Brick Lane with him, were the real community. They were not. They had no idea who they were. They were behaving like drunken football fans. Because when Lutfur Rahman was found to have done corruption in terms as a mayor and was ousted for 5 years, banned for 5 years from standing by Richard Morey, quote QC, none of these, including Galloway, opened their mouth. None of them. And they have not opened their mouth even now. Because what Richard Morey has listed in his 23rd of April 2015 ruling is extensive, and it requires a lot of very serious evidential work before any of it can be refuted. I have refuted some, but I have not refuted the legal kind of outcome that he actually represented. I have refuted Morey's racism and other things. But I have not rejected his ruling on legal grounds. So Galloway was lying when he said that it was him who paved the way for the Bengali to become an MP in the first place. Now look at this. If he were right, then it would be correct to say that he had some kind of magical electoral power. Something similar to the line peddled by the likes of Boris the Liar Johnson. Like the BBC's corrupt Norman Smith used to say about Boris Johnson, he is a winner. He is no fucking such thing. Why? Because at the very election that he fought against the fellow Scotsman, he said, Jim Fitzpatrick, for Poplar Limehouse, Galloway lost miserably to Jim Fitzpatrick. He couldn't even win that seat. How dare the liar Galloway say that he paved the way for a Bengali or a Bangladeshi to become an MP from this area? Why doesn't he go back to Dundee and try it? The people of Dundee would never have him. And the people across Scotland would not have him. Which is why he is particularly poisonously, venomously vocal against Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP. He is quite happy to support Britain leaving the European Union. but is fiercely opposed to Scotland leaving the United Kingdom. What a contradictory liar. How dare he and his racist advisors and partners, how dare these racist criminals insult our community? So we held that demonstration in the days that were filled with the community without a Galloway. There was no Galloway. Nobody gave a shit about Galloway in October 2004. And we had the impact. Galloway never ever had such impact locally. We had an impact before the day of the demonstration, and we had the impact 3 days after because the publishing schedule of the Tower Hamlets Recorder made that inevitable that the paper was published only on the Wednesday after the Friday of our demonstration. And that heading, then our heading said, anger of a community. We are still angry because the campaign, Khoodeelaar campaign, is embarked on defending the community, not just against the Crossrail hole, but for all universal topics and rights, and against the corruption of Luthu Rahman, whatever he may be allowed to say by Sky News and the BBC stupid boy, Newsnight boy, David Grossman, the idiot, grossly stupid. I'm checking the time. It's 1 hour 22 minutes, isn't it? So we shall be coming to an end to this program that we've talked about the 22nd of October 2004 demonstration. And I remember my colleague K. Jordan, and even if I haven't got a picture in front of me of the demonstration at that time, I cannot say where Annetta Pedretti was. I cannot say that. So I'll check that before the relevant next edition and confirm and update accordingly whether Annetta Pedretti was there or not. Essentially, Annetta Pedretti, even if she wasn't there on that occasion, was one of the key activists in the campaign, Khoodeelaar campaign against the Crossrail hole. Whatever her motivation, Annetta was absolutely a constant factor. And we shall be talking more about Annetta Pedretti, K. Jordan, and the others that were actually physically present at the demonstration. As we said before, we defeated the UK central government department and the UK Parliament because both houses of Parliament, both of them, both of these corrupt houses of Parliament, the Crossrail Select Committee, passed the bill that contained the provision of digging the hole in Brick Lane. And he said, 2 fingers to the Crips. And he said, fuck you. We stop you. And we did stop them. It is historic fact. The community did that. Not the fucking socialist wonkers and assorted other racist lefty tendies, liars. We shall be continuing in the next edition. This is 03:15 hours GMT on Sunday, the 23rd of October 2022. This is bringing to an end the Baby Angel Geronimo editions, witnessing the disintegration of Boris Johnson the depraved criminal who is trying to stage a comeback.